Since this is a SIPRI report that I am pegging this segment on, let me begin with Mr. Wezeman. Mr. Wezeman, give us a sense of what these trends show.
I think overall it does show that there is an increase in military spending, and that is by itself something which we should be concerned about. It does show that some of the major states in the world, in particular the US, China, Russia, are again competing against each other in military terms, and that is of course a concern too. And then of course there are wide differences within different regions. Regions. We see, for example, that in Africa there's not much of an increase. It's only a small military spending region, but the diversity in development there is really enormous, and there are major concerns about how military spending may affect a poor region like that. Take, for example, the Middle East, another region where we see very high levels of military spending, which are, of course, closely related to the tensions and the rivalries within that region. So each of these regions, we see different developments, which I think we should discuss separately because they are very diverse and not necessarily showing one kind of homogeneous development throughout the world.
Okay, I will come back with more questions, Mr. Wezeman, but let me go to Professor Clarke here. Professor Clarke, are we looking at a return after 2 decades of essentially war on terror back to major power rivalries and tensions, and that is the reason for this spike?
I think that's very much part of the world economic and military order that we now have. That there are the 4 big players who are United States, China, Russia, and India, and they're all big players for different reasons, but they are big players, and they are the 4 players that, in effect, set the weather for the rest of us. They actually create the political weather for the rest of us. And what you can see is the return of great power politics in the world, on top of the fragmentation and the tendency towards terror and towards state collapse that we've also seen for the last 20 or 30 years. So it's as if a rather old-fashioned pattern of great power competition is overlaid on a new pattern that we've only seen really since the middle of the Cold War of tremendous state fragmentation. So it makes for a much more disordered world. It's not necessarily more dangerous than it was 50 years ago, but it's certainly more disordered, and it's more difficult to understand.